Welcome back to another impactful night of the Impact of Education Leadership. This is episode 216. I'm your host, ID34, Dr. Isaiah Jerome III. Listen, tonight I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. PLCs. PLCs is short for Professional Learning Communities. And from this episode, I'm going to be taking from the book by Dr. Dufour and Dufour, Revisiting Professional Learning Communities at Work. Now, this book has proven insights for sustained and substantive school improvements. Again, this book was written by Richard Dufour, Rebecca Dufour, Robert Ecker, Mike Matos, and Anthony, the great Anthony Muhammad. So tonight is going to be a very thrilling, and it's going to be a very key leverage opportunities for educational leadership 2.0. With that being said, tonight I'm going to be talking about the 4 pillars of professional learning community at work, which are mission, vision, values, and goals. And before I get started, I want to talk about what are some of the key elements that we are looking for tonight, and what are some of the things that you need to know that are key factors for having positive school cultures. Now, you need to know that it is impossible for a school or district to develop the capacity to function as a PLC without undergoing profound cultural shifts. A PLC is a professional learning community, and when we as educators, as practitioners, administrators really understand the purpose of a PLC, then we understand that we embody that. We embody a walking PLC. It's not just a committee, it's not just a meeting, but it is a lifestyle. And so in order for this lifestyle to work, this book kind of goes through the different clusters and categories of breaking it down, of breaking down the change process and the mind shift for this phenomenon. So first, we must understand that a shift is a fundamental purpose as it relates to a professional learning community. And so we have to go and shift from a focus on teaching to a focus on learning. Then from a emphasis on what was taught to a fixation on what students learn. And from coverage of curriculum and content to demonstration of proficiency in that content. Here in Texas, we have the Texas Essentials Knowledge and Skills as a state standard that our students are given the opportunity to master. And so the expectation for them is to learn with high leverage. Only when it comes to high leverage instruction delivery can those students achieve that. And so one of the shifts that we have to focus on in our state is from providing individual teachers with curriculum documents such as those state standards and curriculum guides to engaging collaborative teams in building shared knowledge regarding essential curricula. And this is from expecting some students to learn to expecting all students to learn. We exercise No Child Left Behind, Every Student Succeed Act that has been set in place by our administration. And so a shift also needs to occur with the use of our assessments, going from infrequent summative assessments to frequent common formative assessments, and from assessments to determine which students failed to learn by that deadline or that time slot, to assessments to identify students who need additional time and designated support to be able to understand those standards that have to be taught. And from assessment used to reward and punish students to assessments used to inform and motivate students intrinsically. And from assessing many things infrequently to assessing a few things frequently. From teaching large amounts of content to breaking down content into small chunks and bite-sized pieces for students to consume. And from individual teachers' assessments to collaborative team developed assessments. And then from each teacher determining the criteria to be used in assembling student work to collaborative teams clarifying the criteria and ensuring consistency among team members when accessing student work. It is from this where we can teach our students to be more resilient, where we can teach our teachers to have more of a cooperative and co-creating educational environment, to see our students learning cooperatively and collaborative groups. And this is necessary from an over-reliance on one kind of assessment to balance those assessments, and from focusing on average scores to monitoring each student's proficiency in every essential skill. And those essential skills, where it relates to math or reading language arts or social studies and science, or those political, economic, geographical, or social pillars that is emphasized in our social studies curriculum. And this is important to shift in the response when students don't learn. And so let me go back to the pillars, the 4 pillars of a professional learning community at work. Starts with a mission, and the mission is, well, the mission should ask this question. It should ask the question, why do we exist? Why are we here? What are we here to do? And then from the mission should come the vision. The vision is, what do we hope to become? Meaning in the future. Where do we see ourselves in the future? And so you can determine that this is the business plan or the organizational plan of a successful professional learning community at work. And then we need to look at our disposition. We need to look at our values. We need to look at what commitments must we make to create the school or district that will improve our ability to fulfill our purpose. And as you go on a journey and learn your purpose, you develop your disposition. And then finally, the 4th pillar is, what are our goals? Goals. What goal will we use to monitor our progress? How are we tracking our growth? How are we monitoring student growth, learning, teacher development, leadership capacity? How are we monitoring it, and how are we measuring it? And then we can see shifts to occur. We'll start seeing shifts occur, like from individual teachers determining the appropriate response to a systematic response that ensures support to and for every student. We'll start seeing the mindset shift from fixed time and support for learning to time and support for learning as variables. We'll see changes from remediation to intervention, from invitational support outside of the school day to direct support, that is required support occurring during the school day. We'll start seeing shifts from one opportunity to demonstrate learning to multiple opportunities to demonstrate learning. And then we'll start seeing the shifts of students after we see the shifts of students. After we see the shifts of teachers. So a shift in the work of a teacher will then go from isolation to collaboration, from each teacher clarifying what students must learn to collaborative teams building shared knowledge and understand about essential learning for all students. We'll start seeing shifts from teacher assigning priorities to different learning standards to collaborative teams establishing the priority of respective learning standards. Then we'll begin to build, and from there, each teacher determining the pacing of the curriculum will shift to collaborative teams of teachers agreeing on common practices and common pacing strategies for delivering their instructions to those students. From individual teachers attempting to discover ways to improve results to collaborative teams of teachers helping each one another improve holistically. From privatization of practice to open sharing of practice, and from decisions made based on individual preferences to decisions made collectively by building shared knowledge of best practices. These are some of the strategies that we need to start seeing when it relates to shifting teacher mindsets and school culture mindsets. We'll start seeing shifts from collaborative life on matters unrelated to student achievement to collaborative focused on issues and questions that most impact student achievements. When we start to clearly or explicitly focus on issues and questions that are in students' day-to-day lives that they use in their day-to-day, then we can push the students and intrinsically motivate students to learn in a co-created world where learning becomes not only fun but high leverage. Students begin to challenge themselves. Once we go from an assumption that these are my students, those are your students, to the notion that the assumption that these are all of our students. And then our focus will begin to change. And what are some of the things that we can look for as it relates to our focus beginning to see a change? Well, there are a few things that we can start looking at. One, we will go from an external focus on issues outside the school to internal focus on steps the staff can take to improve the school. We'll go from a focus on inputs to a focus on results. We'll go from a focus on a student's background to a focus on the student's future, the student's potential, a student's purpose. I was created with a purpose. I'm strong, I'm resilient. We will begin to develop mottos and creeds to help intrinsically motivate our students to be successful. When we go from a focus on goals related to completion of projects and activities to SMART goals demanding evidence of student learning. When we go from teachers gathering data from their individual constructed tests to assign grades to collaborative teams acquiring information from common assessments to, one, inform their individual and collective practices to respond to students who need additional time and support. From independence to interdependence, then we will see growth in all of our students. When we go from long-term strategic planning to planning for short-term wins, then we can begin to celebrate our students, and everyone is included. When we go from infrequent generic recognition to frequent specific recognition and a culture of celebration that creates many winners, then we can start seeing the student culture and school culture shift in our schools, shift in our professional development, when we start seeing training workshops and courses develop into more job-embedded learning, then we can start seeing improvement. When we go from expectation that learning occurs infrequently on the few days devoted to professional development to an expectation that learning is ongoing and occurs as part of routine work practice. When we see presentations to entire faculties shift to team-based action research, then we will see practitioners in the fields develop drastically in their learning, in their instruction, in their practice. When we shift from learning by listening to learning by doing, then we will become masters in our craft. When we change from learning individually through courses and workshops to learning collectively by working together in a cohesive serendipity, then we will see dramatic growth. From accessing impact based on teacher satisfaction to assessing impact based on evidence and improved student learning. Let me say that again. When we begin to access impact based on teacher satisfaction to accessing impact based on evidence of improved student learning, then we will see a professional learning community at work. From short-term exposure to multiple concepts and practices to sustained commitment to limited focused initiative. So in any organization, sustainability is key for longevity. And so as it relates to professional learning communities at work and the four pillars that they're tied to, for our mission question to be answered, why do we exist? We exist to produce future citizens of this society, to carry the torch. And what is our vision? What do we hope to become? We hope to become a premier professional learning community where we are at the apex of the competitive edge, where we can compete in a global society with the values that we have instilled in our scholars and with the goals that we have given them to measure their growth. This is the impact of educational leadership, and this is the premise or the reason why we exist, with those four goals in mind. Because when a person needs to feel adequate, okay, but they clash with external forces that is too great to overcome, a lot of times the result is disaster. So how can we alleviate this? Well, we can alleviate these clashes by having a shared school vision on learning, by professional learning opportunities for all staff, by collaborative work and learning, and by continuous change of school organization that will support learning leadership. Hey, this was another impactful night of the Impact of Education Leadership. This is Dr. Isaac Drone III. Good night. Impact of Educational Leadership Podcast. Facebook,